Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
Goal pursuit is the process of developing a roadmap, an internal GPS for yours and your team's success. That's a quote from our guest today, Andy Riise, the mental toughness coach. It's an interesting time of year, as many of us have made New Year's resolutions, and statistics show that by the third week in January, somewhere around the 17th of January, many of us lose connection with those New Year's resolutions and that energy that we come into the year with. We fall into our old habits and ways of being. If this is you, no worries. We've got the perfect show for you, and it's time to recommit. Or if you are still sticking diligently to your New Year's resolution, great. Congratulations. We applaud you. Wherever you find yourself in that goal pursuit and commitment spectrum, our guest today, Andy Riise, is here to help us understand what it takes to get after your goals. Welcome back to the Men Talking Mindfulness Show. I'm John McCaskill, and each week my co-host Will Schneider and I work to break down and demystify an aspect of mindfulness and make it meaningful to you. This week, we're talking again with the mental toughness coach, Andy Riise. And I got to tell you, this week is going to be a load of fun, as Andy and I, as much as we are friends, we are also arch rivals. And we'll get into all that in the show. That said, I guess I owe this dude some kind of intro, so I'll get into that. Andy is a 2001 graduate of West Point, the inferior service academy. His words, not mine, I'm just saying. Former Army football player, presidential leadership scholar, and retired Army lieutenant colonel. During his 20-plus year military career, he led soldiers overseas during multiple overseas deployments, including 5 years with 2 Special Forces units. He also taught psychology and leadership at West Point and the Air Force Academy. Note, they would not take him at Annapolis. I'm just saying. After retiring, he served as a mental skills coach for 2 Major League Baseball teams and served as the Director of Defense Innovation at Texas A&M University. His research and teaching focus is leadership, resilience, and mental toughness. He's currently the CEO and founder of Design to Perform LLC. He and his wife have 4 children and live in Houston, Texas. Oh, and he is training for a half Ironman while he's doing all this other stuff. All right. Can't wait to get into this show. It's been a long time coming. But first, I got to turn it over to my co-host over there, Will, for some announcements and our opening practice. Will, brother.
All right. Hey, great to be here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Andy, thank you so much for being part of the show today and talking to us about goals and goal pursuit, especially at this kind of critical juncture for a lot of people in the New Year's resolutions. And so thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And if you're listening live today, January 18th, today ends our early bird special, which you can save $400 off our upcoming retreat, our mindfulness adventure retreat on the East Coast. That's going down on May 18th to the 21st in upstate New York. So there's still time to save by the end of the day. If you're listening on podcast, no worries. As you know, there is still, as of now, there is still space to join this in-person retreat, and there's still an opportunity to save some cash. Head to mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat to learn more. One thing you'll learn as you hit up our website and learn about this retreat is that it's not just a 4-day, 3-night self-investment immersion. When you sign up, what is also part of your investment is our 4-week post-retreat virtual integration program. Let me say that again. A 4-week, where we're going to take 4 weeks after the retreat virtually and help you to integrate all this awareness that you've been created on this retreat and weave it into your life. This retreat is going to be a powerful experience for those of you who take the leap and sign up. We hope you join us. Next, hey, help us grow the show. Take a screenshot right now and post it on your social and let people know that you're becoming more mindful and helping to change the world by being more mindful. And lastly, our YouTube is growing. It's exciting. So join our YouTube. We actually hired a editor to help us to snip some snackable snippets that you can munch on anytime when you need them. So subscribe. The link is simple. It's youtube.com/@Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for your support over there as well. All right, let's ground all this energy, guys, before we kind of move on. Or maybe I should say before we ground the energy, let's do this first. Okay. So before the ground the energy, we put out a questionnaire to all our guests. And Andy, thank you, Andy, for answering our questionnaire. And one of the questions is, what's your preferred name? And Andy put down John's dad. So... And another one he put down here, he goes, our question to our guest is there anything else you'd like us to know? Please provide additional details here. He goes, John sucks. Please, but since he won't stop begging me to be a guest on this show, I kindly obliged. Oh, and beat Navy. So this, oh yeah, there we go.
Let's go.
Just saying.
And personally, I love the water, so I'm definitely have some, maybe a affinity for Navy, but I also love trees a lot. So maybe I'm an Army guy. Plus I have a nephew who's a Marine and my dad was in the Army. So I'm really confused.
Oh man, you're all over.
I love both of you. I know I'm all over. I'm like the fucking hippie in New York.
Up the road. You're down the river from West Point, man. You like to go up there and hang out, and watch games.
And that's it's such an impressive campus, unbelievable, right on the waterfront. I love passing it on the train as I go up and hike. All right, so hey, let's ground ourselves. Let's do our 5-breath opening practice. So ground those feet. Do what you got to do in order to just be more present to these next 5 breaths. So exhale the breath out your mouth like you're blowing out a candle. Empty all the way out. Pull the navel in and extinguish all that breath. And let's take a big, giant inhale through the nose. And exhale out. Big inhale, fill deeply. Exhale out. Few more in. Maybe take a bigger breath. Keep going. Out. Good work. We got 2 more. Inhale. Out. 1 more in. Exhale. And just stay here for a moment and just kind of bathe yourself in the new experience, hopefully, that these 5 breaths have created by just taking a little time, stopping, putting a pause on life, and just finding your breath, which is going to help you become more present, more alive, more in this moment where all the opportunities are anyway. So awesome, everybody. Come back and let's begin. Thank you, Andy. Yeah. Thank you, John. It's good to be back on the show.
You will. That was great. Great. Good stuff. And for those who are listening, for your benefit, something that I showed earlier was my shirt, which says Bean Tavy, which was a epic mistake in one of the Army Navy football games before. But I've also, in honor of the Army beating Navy in this last football game, I've got the background as black and gold. And then for you, again, for those who are listening and not watching, Andy has this amazing tie-dye shirt on, and that is right in line with our show, Men Talking Mindfulness. So
was that peace, love, and smiles? Is that, or braces? What's that?
I'm representing Middletown orthodontics right now because it's the only tie-dye shirt that we have, and I borrowed it from my teenage son who has braces.
You have drawers.
And in honor of you, because you're a hippie.
I'm a hippie. Yes, exactly.
I love hippies though. My little sister's a hippie, so it's all good, man.
Good. All right, cool.
See, this is just an intro to what's going to happen on this show.
So when you started this podcast, I know you're like a LinkedIn top voice, but I had no idea that you'd be co-hosting with Jesus. I mean, it's pretty impressive that you.
Amen, brother. Amen.
We found out in the green room that Will's middle name is Jesus, so it's impressive, man. So hey, I watched Up in Smoke before I came on here, so I'm ready to go, guys. Peace.
Fake news. Fake news. Oh man, awesome. We're not going to be able to get a word in edgewise here today, Will. Oh geez. Here we go.
Hey, Hey, who won that game in December? Who won that?
We already talked about that.
Who won that game?
What? Hey, you know what, Andy? You know what we do in this show? We live in the present. We don't go back in the past. We don't look to the future. We're all about mindfulness and living in the present. So let's move on.
Move forward. Then we won't talk about when I think I got in a crash and I lost a race and I got swept.
We're definitely going to talk about that.
I woke up and it was the middle of December and there was like this goal line stand. That's all I remember. I blacked out.
Yeah. So we'll get into that for sure.
Yeah,
those are the exceptions.
You got your belt? You got your belt? Is your belt on right now? Are you wearing it?
I didn't bring it. Yeah, my championship belt. Hey man, our audience deserves to hear what it is you do, and they want to know about how you stick to goals. But we want to know how you personally got into this line of work. Tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, more so than what I covered in the bio, and how you got into what you do now. Yep.
So the Naval Academy wouldn't take me, so I had to go to the Superior Academy. The truth is, I get seasick. So and so I don't like Cracker Jacks either. So that was kind of like I had an allergic to it. So decided to go to West Point. Was a recruited athlete, played football there. Unlike John, who was an overachiever, he's like Captain America. I struggled mightily at the academy, and so just was getting my butt kicked. Playing football. Being all the demands of that crucible, that 47-month experience. And so I went to this West Point Center for Enhanced Performance, which is interesting because that's in 1989 is where sport and performance psychology, my field, work came into the U.S. military. And then, 20 years later, it's the largest employer of sports psychologists in the world. I'll point out that the Navy I don't think they have any because we've decided that, you guys are a lost cause. So we're not really focusing on y'all. No, but seriously, I got help from an officer who had that background, and I started learning about, mental toughness. And, I'd always thought that I was physically tough. I mean, I was a fullback, I was a football player, was, in decent shape, but I always thought that mental toughness was a byproduct of that. But I quickly found that I needed help. And so not from necessarily a behavioral health standpoint, but from more of a skills-based, strength and conditioning-based side of mental performance. And so learned about being confident despite setbacks, how to overcome challenges and setbacks, how to stay committed to my goals, and then how to build, confidence no matter what you go through. And so those mental skills really became a part of who I am, who I was then. I was just in survival mode. Again, John was like the top of his class. He can't relate to this, but at 9/11 happened. We graduated. Some of us lower in the class ranking than others. It was in honor of the Naval Academy mascot. That's actually the person who's last is called the GOAT. And so I was not the GOAT, but I was really close to that too.
GOAT. John, when I hear that, I think greatest of all time.
Greatest of all time.
I'll be the fucking GOAT. I'll be the GOAT.
He is the GOAT. The greatest of all time.
Yeah.
I got to tell you real quick, funny anecdote while you're telling the story about the GOAT. At the Navy, the equivalent at Annapolis, the equivalent is called the Anchor Man, and that Anchor Man gets $1.
Ron Burgundy. Okay.
Right. That Anchor Man gets $1 from everybody in the class. So he walks away with almost $1,000 for being the bottom of the class. But get this, our commencement speaker was President Bush. And they said, hey, you're going to go up there, you're going to shake his hand, you're going to get your graduation certificate, diploma, and walk off the stage. You're not going to do anything. This guy, who's actually still in the Navy, and I think he's about to put on 06. I won't mention names, but if you look it up, it's there in the news. He gets up there. He's a big football player. He gets up there and bear hugs the president.
Nice.
Lifts him up and puts him down. And he was actually immediately delayed in graduation. So they gave him his stuff and then took it right back, and he wasn't able to graduate for another 3 months. Yeah,
are you kidding me? He made the graduation day and he got delayed.
He made it graduate because of that. And they made him write letters to the president, made him write letters to the various chiefs of the different branches, apologizing for his stuff. But now he's like a legend for it.
Wow.
So anyway, man, sorry,
that's a good story. No, that's a good. That's an excellent story. But that's an excellent story. Yeah, wonder what the Air Force calls their last is like, is it, the Blue Falcon? What is that? I have no idea.
Yeah,
So
probably.
I should know.
The pigeon.
The pigeon. Yeah. The pigeon dropping. So yeah,
For those who don't know, a Blue Falcon, that's a derogatory term within the Air Force, and it's BF for buddy fucker.
Buddy fucker. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. Side note is I had a commander. My commander in 7th group, who also don't be named, in his command guidance, which is basically kind of like the vision for. He actually had it listed, written in there in an official memo, like "Don't be a buddy fucker." That was official guidance. So there you go. You don't take anything away from this. Remember that. Don't be a buddy fucker. So
exactly.
Okay, so John and I graduated same year as you know, and then 9/11 happened, like 100 days after we graduated, and so like John, I found myself leading 30 men and women, or men at the time only in combat, and then really quickly, things transition, right? I'm leading a convoy, 500 vehicle convoy in the middle of the desert, trying to navigate across that. We're doing the sprint to Baghdad. I was a multiple launch rocket system. So I was an artillery officer. And so you think about rocket launcher, that can shoot up to 300 plus miles, GPS coordinates. They can destroy 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters square. So we did a lot of that. And then when we got to Baghdad, we transitioned to, what this asymmetric fight is. And what that means is that, the enemy wasn't going to go toe to toe with us, because we had superior firepower. They were going to start hitting us with roadside bombs and sniper fire. And we weren't really prepared for that. And so I quickly realized that we had to adapt and overcome that. And to do that in real time was a challenge. And I think that the thing that stood out to me at the time is that we were physically fit, relatively speaking, for Army guys. We were technically and tactically competent, socially connected, but mental toughness is what really led us to be able to make that pivot. And, I found that combat is a thinking person's game, and that, you have to be as mentally fit as you are physically fit in order to be able to succeed at that in life. And so we came back and, we changed everything the way we got ready to go train, fight, and win overseas. And we didn't do that well at first. Right. So I knew how to bring that skill set into myself, but I didn't know how to train it to my soldiers. Right. And at that time, it wasn't popular. And a lot of people will know, John remembers this. We didn't even call it mental health. It was called behavioral health, because there's such a stigma on anything having to do with the word mental. It was in the shadows. My field was very fledgling at the time, sport and performance psychology. So after my second deployment in Iraq and Afghanistan, I got the opportunity to go back and teach at West Point. So as it turns out, the captain that I worked with, captain of the Army, is like mid-level career officer. He's now 10 years later, he's a colonel, a senior officer, a PhD, and the guy I worked with now runs the department, the Center for Enhanced Performance. So he brought me back without a degree. At the time, it was a very difficult deployment, 15 months, training, fighting, living with the Iraqi Army, training, advising, assisting them. I call that my first foray into combat coaching, and John knows what I'm talking about. Foreign internal defense is what we call it in special operations, but really you're a combat coach. And, really wanted to get out of the Army, and I was at the 10-year mark. I already done 5 past what my commitment was from the academy to pay that back. And I missed the birth of my son. My wife is burnt out. And so we're now like, hey, let's just pull off on the roadside of life and figure it out. I ended up just falling in love with teaching. First of all, going back to the academy, I had some imposter syndrome. I was waiting for some officer to come out and call me out and saying, hey, you dirtbag, what are you doing back here teaching with the cadets? But part of my mission of doing that, I wanted to help the cadets who were struggling, right? Because the academies tend to, for better or worse, they really put a lot of emphasis on good cadets or good midshipmen. But like the fun ones who are, and they want to make sure you're successful, but folks who are really on the fringe, they can get left behind. And so I wanted to be the guy who, help be part of the island on the storm for those types of people, those types of leaders, because, the history shows that those people who struggle end up being really resilient, gritty, and high performing when they get into uniform. And so I knew that, I experienced that. And so, it was interesting at that time in the military is that, we had more soldiers killing themselves at home station than we were in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. And so our nation's leaders said, hey, we're going to do something about this. So they formed a task force, and I got hayed, meaning I got voluntold to go down to the University of Pennsylvania from West Point and be part of this task force. I'm sitting around looking at these colonels, and what I found out later is these giants in psychology, like, Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman, Karen Rivich, seminal authors in positive psychology and resilience. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? You know, they're like, hey, sit down, Captain Riise. You know, you just got back from combat. You represent, you know, somebody who just got back from overseas, and we want your perspective, you know. And again, I didn't even have a master's degree, right, at that time. And so I really got steeped in that. I helped kind of convert the psychology of resilience, or what I call psychological defense, from what was 5th and 6th grade teachers that all over the world, to converting that to soldiers. I was one of the Army's first master resilience trainers, helped start the comprehensive soldier fitness program. And then at that time I started working, a lot of my work was outside the academy. So we had a lot of graduates like John and I at this time who had, you know, been reaching back to the academy, demanding that type of training to train your brain, just like you train your body, your team, your character, and your craft. And so, you know, I had started working a little bit with special forces. I had no experience doing that. I wasn't even airborne qualified. I mean, I couldn't exit an aircraft to go to work. So I went back, started working with special forces. They were standing up at the time. You know, we were adding more SEAL teams. We were adding more special forces groups to meet the growing demand of our operational tempo. And so I helped stand up the 4th Battalion and 7th Special Forces Group, which is, you know, was originally at Fort Bragg in North Carolina near Fayetteville, and then moved down to Northwest Florida into the Panhandle. They were standing up a brand new Special Forces unit, and I was number 4 guy to sign in. And it's still one of the honors of my life to say that I helped stand up a Special Forces unit, especially since I hadn't come from that community, and then be considered a leader. And then on top of that, you know, we trained and we manned and equipped it, and then we deployed to Afghanistan as a special operations task force, you know, in 2013, which ironically, John and I were like had adjacent areas of responsibility with, and you were at SEAL Team 10 then, right, John?
Yep. Sure enough.
Yep. So we were there in Afghanistan at the same time, as we found out later on. And then, you know, and I was in charge of all the fires for that entire province. Right. So, you know, my job was
so real quick, Andy, for those who are not familiar with what fires is, can you just touch on that for 1 second?
Yeah.
What fires mean?
You think it's one of 5 warfighting functions. And what it means is that, you know, so anything that comes off an aircraft, a rail of an airplane, artillery, mortars, rockets, missiles, but it's all lethal effects, but also non-lethal effects. What that means is anything that we do as a fighting force that changes the behavior of the enemy or the population, then that's fires, you know, or fires and effects. And so that was my job. And, you know, there's the soft truce, the Special Operations Forces truce. And what I love about have been a soft guy is that, hey, there's some imperatives, right? And one of them is that most Special Operations Forces missions require non-special operations support. And that definitely was me. Half of those units are guys like me who are cooks, and they're people who are logisticians, they're HR people, and guys like me who didn't go through the amazing training, assessment, selection that John did, but still were specially selected to go do a job for them. And I loved it. I fit in really well. And I felt kind of saw myself as being this protector, as a guy. Those guys they have a lot of capability, but they didn't have the big stick. And so I always said that I was the big stick for special forces teams. And I love that. But I also had the skill sets being a mental skills coach. And, you know, we were forming this tactical athlete concept and starting to treat elite tactical athletes as they should be, and to help improve their longevity, their health, wellness, and their performance in and out of the battlefield. And so they started hiring strength coaches, nutritionists, physical therapists. And now that's the norm. It was new at the time. We didn't have embedded contracted mental skills coaches yet. So they, you know, being adaptive as they are, they utilize all the skill sets that you bring to the team, which makes them amazing. And so they realized I had the skill set. So I started working one-on-one and with special forces teams. And that was amazing. And being able to do that at home station, then overseas when I was doing my job. And, you know, you think about us doing visualization and imagery as part of our rehearsal of concept before we go out on a mission, you know, that is still something I really think was a cool opportunity. So then now I'm in this really weird place where I've got to figure out how to be a mental skills coach. And I went back and got my degree. I want to stay in special operations, but I still have the traditional career path that I had to follow to be able to make it a career if I wanted to do that. And so our friend Jason Van Camp at the time had just been medically retired. He had this idea to bring together the best practices of special forces and, you know, and their leadership best practices, and also bring those to professional sports and like corporate leadership. And so our first client was the New York Jets. And I went and did that. And obviously John is a big part of that, Mission 60. and we helped write the book Deliberate Discomfort together as well too, grow that business. So I was doing that as a side hustle, right, and trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, I went back to 10th Special Forces Group. I got a chance to get picked up to teach at the Department of Behavioral Science and Leadership at the Air Force Academy. And then my last duty station was running an academic department at Fort Benning in Georgia. And then when I retired, I like John, I did some with his Veterans Path work. I was dabbling in a bunch of different things. It was during the pandemic. And so I worked with McChrystal Group with consulting. I helped start the Veterans Coaching Program at Texas A&M within their coaching academy. And then I was working with the Colorado Rockies in 2020 as well. But obviously that was a pandemic year. They didn't hire, but I was now on the inside track. And so I got hired by the Reds in 2021. And then, which was phenomenal. It was like, so I literally went from being a red leg in the Army, which is what we call artillery officers. They wore red stockings during the Mexican-American War. So I went from being a red leg in the Army to being a red leg in Major League Baseball. Cincinnati Reds were the Red Legs. And it was amazing. And but I was gone from my family a lot. 20 out of 25 days was on the road. And being a world-class father and husband is really important to me, as is, I'm sure, you guys. And so now I've been gone 20 years. Now I got to, now I'm away from my family. This defeats the purpose of why I retired. So I came back, worked at Texas A&M, doing the defense innovation work, but I miss being a coach. So I went out on my own in May, and so started Design to Perform, and I'm doing 1099 or contract work with some amazing folks in the mental fitness space. Who I am as a servant leader and a coach, and my mission is to help leaders and teams become the best version of themselves and develop mental strength to win from the inside out. That's who I am. That's what I do.
That is truly who you are. I mean, I know you from the years that we've worked together and hung out together and everything else. And that is truly who you are. And you may have seen me smiling when you were talking about Red Leg. There's a relatively new brewing company here in Colorado Springs, and Will and I actually drank there together at the Red Leg Brewing Company, and it's in our intro. You may have noticed us when we cheers the beer. That's at Red Leg Brewing Company. So awesome. another hat tip to you guys.
Yeah, king of battle, man. And I'd be remiss to say too, like I know I give you guys a lot of shit and so forth, but I have a lot of love for you guys. Like the Greeks had 5 or 6 different ways of love, and this is agape love. That's brotherly love for everyone, and I have a lot of love for you guys and what you do. And I was listening to the episode with Prime Hall yesterday, and it just occurs to me that you got all these, warrior monks who are coming back from our journey, and like Oedipus, and we're coming back and taking this realization that we realize that you have to train all these modalities and domains of the human dimension. And the fact that we're doing it and we're figuring it out together, I think is really special, and I think you guys are creating this forum to where we're bringing this to the forefront. We're bringing it to the mainstream. We're all democratizing how to train your mind. And I'm proud to be a part of that with you guys. So hats off to you.
Thanks.
No, we appreciate that. Thank you. And that's the one way that we see the show is like this platform for minds like yours and work like yours to get into the front of people's minds, so they can really achieve more of the greatness that they have locked inside. And if they don't access that greatness, like that's when we see a lot of the mental health problems. And so why don't we just jump in with, why don't we just talk about goals? Like, we had, I don't know where you want to start with goals. I mean, it's the thing we talk about at the top of the show, but, what's the best ways to pursue goals? And also I'll add, if you want to throw in there, like what gets in the way of people being, at this time of year, dropping off those resolutions, and then just going into their old habits.
Sure. So, just to kind of lay down a definition real quick, I guess I play in academia, so, I dabble in definitions of things. So
right, we're on the show, man. That's how we normally kick off a show. We always start with definitions. So go for it, man.
Yep. So, I think a goal is really kind of a dream with legs, to use a quote that I don't remember who quoted it, maybe Michael Scott or Wayne Gretzky. I don't know which one. So goal pursuit then is the process of pursuing those objectives that you want to accomplish and then growing through the process. Right. And then when I described it, you had the quote, it's going on a road trip, and, but we as humans don't have a very good GPS that's built into us. We do. The hippocampus, right, kind of help us, it helps us navigate things in ourselves in the world. But in terms of like figuring out who we are now and who we want to be in the future and what do we want to accomplish? Like, we're not very good at that. We have to have a system and a process. And what I love about goal pursuit is that it's one of the most evidence-based processes that are out there. It actually doesn't even come from what I teach isn't just from sport and performance psychology. It comes from positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment training, mindfulness, right? So I'm very much an interdisciplinary practitioner. So this comes from social psychology. And the seminal authors are Locke and Latham. I believe they taught at the Ohio State University. I'm not sure if they're still there or not too, but they did a bunch of studies on this. And what they found, what was interesting is that, it's contrary to kind of, conventional wisdom, is that the higher and harder the goals are, the actually more likely you are to achieve them. Right. And so that's what's interesting in that too. But a lot of people, it's interesting to me is that goal pursuit is what I call it, but it's called goal setting in the literature. Is that actually it's interesting to me. There's a lot of influencers who are out there who are really down on goals. Like, hey, goals are overrated, and really down in the mouth in terms of goals. Right. I was actually pretty surprised. I love James Clear, but I was really surprised that he was really knocking goals in Atomic Habits. I reread it.
I think I have Atomic Habits.
And I think because he has a misconception about the process, right? Because goal pursuit has two aspects to it. And then I teach the 4 C's of mental toughness. And so when I teach goal pursuit,
let me bring that up.
Yeah. You want to throw that up there?
Yeah.
I won't get into the whole thing, that'll take forever, but the 4 C's of mental toughness, this comes from AQR International. This is what I teach. Yes. Mental toughness is actually a thing. Mental toughness is the ability and willingness to be able to execute a set of tasks at the upper range of your potential, regardless of circumstances. In other words, mental toughness, I say, is getting the most out of what you have to be at your best when it matters the most, right? And it's about optimal performance. Like I said, it's not about peak performance or high performance. It's about getting when you have your C game. How do you still get a C plus, right? That's what Ken Riise used to say. Who was a late great mentor of mine. But then when you look at the commitment side, there's control, commitment, challenge, and confidence. Those are the 4 elements. There's 2 sub-factors. And so when I look at commitment, you see there's 2 really key aspects to goal pursuit. One of them is about goal orientation. And what that's about is about the process, right? That's the process of taking the steps one thing at a time and the attitudes and behaviors that associated with, the journey, right? Like if you're going on a road trip, and it's like going on a mission, right? The other piece is achievement orientation. Now that's actually what James Clear and a lot of people are thinking about, because they're thinking about getting stuff done and achieving results. So it actually takes both of those things. And the reason why goal pursuit is so valuable to us as human beings, as individuals and teams, is because it gives us purpose, or a why for doing something. It gives us direction. In terms of orient us towards, the right actions and attitudes. And it gives us motivation, purpose, and direction, right? And the motivation piece is both external and internal, but the most important piece that it does is the internal motivational factors, right? Which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why it is. And then but the most important thing is the how-to, right? So that's a little bit of the what and the so what.
Okay.
Right on, man. This is good stuff. And again, for those who are listening to the show and not watching, what I have up is the 4 C's. So if you want to come check it out, we'll put a link to where Andy actually teaches this on his Design to Perform YouTube site. But we're looking at the 4 C's here in front of us. So if you're listening, check it out.
And I think I just want to answer your question too. Go ahead, Go ahead, Will.
No, I like come back to what you said about James Clear, and people are just kind of like bashing goals, and in the past, like I've heard people say, it's the discipline that matters. Right. Yep. And if you don't have the discipline, then the goals are going to, you're going to fall short of the goals anyway, but they are, but I love what you had just spoken of as far as goals, because they're an intrinsic motivator in the sense they give us that, they fire us up, right? They get us out of bed in the morning, right? The discipline doesn't necessarily, unless we have a goal to develop more discipline, but that takes a goal, right? And that's an intrinsic motivator. So can you kind of talk about the relationship between discipline and goals, please, and how they relate and how they help one another?
No, that's great, Will, too. And I also I didn't answer your question about why people fall short, but we'll get there. But yeah.
Oh yeah, let's do that after this discipline, because this is probably part of the conversation here, right?
It is
discipline, right?
You're exactly right. Yeah. So it's interesting too, and again, Jocko, take him or leave him, right? I love my fellow veteran I'm a wannabe influencer. He's definitely an influencer, right? But I think the challenge is that sometimes when they're outside of their wheelhouse a little bit, as in this case, they tend to say stuff that they believe that isn't necessarily true, could be misleading. This is an example of that, right? And so when I talk about discipline, which, obviously, like John and I went to service academies and served our whole lives in the military. We know a little bit about discipline, right? Discipline is about compliance at the end of the day. It's about compliance to a specific set of behaviors that usually have an expectation if they're done right, and it's standard associated with, right? So like the way you wear your haircut, not John, because the Navy SEALs got really great hair and product.
Come on.
Or wearing
I did my hair specifically because I knew you were going to go there today, man. I was like, I got to have my hair because normally it's all over the place under a hat. But I got to change up my game plan.
Yeah, I'm too predictable now. I'm too predictable. I need to change up my game plan with you. Yeah, I've got to keep going back to the same jokes.
Sorry, man. I broke your flow.
Yeah, you did. So discipline's about compliance, right? But I think that's good. That's a good from an extrinsic standpoint too, because there's an internal and external aspect of discipline too. Doing something because it's the right thing to do, like making moral and ethical decisions, like stuff that we learned in our character development stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you need both discipline and motivation. It's not discipline versus motivation, guys. No. Like if you're listening to this, don't listen to that. It's discipline and motivation. And here's why: because motivation is about the internal factors, right? The most important of those is autonomy. It means I have to have the ability and willingness, the choice to be able to do something on my own with the right resources around me, like the people, the tools, so on and so forth, right? Mastery means I have the skill set to then develop competence, and the purpose is the why, which is incredibly important, right? And we as leaders, if you're a leader out there, that it's not about how much motivation, it's how are you leveraging and influencing motivation to get people to be disciplined and motivated. And a lot of people don't spend the time to understand how those two things, there's the drivers, I call them the fuel that helps drive our performance engine, right? So if you want to be an optimal performer, even when you're tired, you're hungry, you're sick, you're not having a good day, if you have those two factors, you have motivation and you have discipline, you have commitment and compliance, you're more likely to be able to get stuff done and move closer to your goals. So that's why those two things, I just wanted to debunk that myth. Thank you for that, Will. And I think that's a big reason why people fall off the wagon. Like John fell off the wagon after he crushed me in the half Ironman. He completely just fell off like the pony cart, I don't know. I know what happened to the guy. Strava was just blowing up left and right. And then all of a sudden it went dormant. I'm like, come on, man. I collapsed my lungs. What's your excuse? Not joking. John actually has a life, unlike me. So he's actually a world-class father, and it makes me feel bad about myself all the time.
Oh, no, I know you're a world-class father.
No. So anyways, where was I? So the reason why people stop, the gyms are full the first week of January, and then they're completely empty by February. And you're like, man, I can, finally I get to go, use the machines again. The reason why is that people tend to set them, which is why I don't use the word setting, and then they forget them, right? And then so again, that the motivation and the discipline really isn't there, so those factors, the things will wane, right? And so you fall back to your dominant habits, especially if there's a change or something that's disrupting what you normally do. It's like you have these neural pathways that, are really what you fall back on in terms of what you do subconsciously. So that's what happens. You fall back into those existing patterns in terms of how you think and what you do, and real behavioral change doesn't really happen because it takes about, some studies suggest between 44 to 60 days to form a habit, right?
Right. Well, you mentioned there's, in order to really be effective at getting shit done, pursuing something, so goal, I think anybody can have a goal because a goal inspires, right? That's right. But there is, you guys are lucky in the sense, or lucky you made the choice to join the military because you naturally you're forced in developing a tremendous amount of discipline, right? I mean, I think I'm kind of accurate in saying that, right?
Yeah.
So what
I think there's some discipline that you already have inherently, and the military just helps to kind of polish that up. And
it sets the conditions. It creates the environment and sets the conditions for discipline to happen. Yes, you're right.
And have the habit of discipline, right?
That's right.
What if I have a great idea, I want to write a book, or I want to go out and climb a huge mountain or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I have that inspiration is running inside me to get that done. But
Right.
I haven't developed because whatever, I just had a bad upbringing or I was lazy
Yeah.
at school or just kind of
Yeah.
fumbled through life. It's like, so how do I, the other side of that equation is the discipline. So what are some steps or baby steps that you do that need to be there in order to meet that other half of the equation of the inspiration of the goal itself? Like where do you start if you need to develop better disciplines or just develop the skill of discipline, or at least enhance the discipline you already have in order to achieve and step in to the arena, if you will, right? Of really kicking ass and pursuing your goals.
Yeah. I think it starts with being willing to do things that you don't like to do. Right. And so I think, discipline happens when you start to, and again, like, it's cliche, deliberate discomfort. I wrote a book called that. All right. Got it, guy. Okay.
Right.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. What the hell does that mean? John, I heard you the other day in your podcast. We haven't talked about it, but Limitless with, Chris Hemsworth, it's kind of really cool show that I know Becca likes it because Chris Hemsworth takes his shirt off. He reminds her of your younger self when you used to not wear shirts. But anyways, it's really interesting because it's like, all right, and again, I wasn't a big cold shower guy. I mean, this is a good example of that. And I'm starting to dig into, cold water plunges and, how that can help your longevity and how good it is for your physical body and how it resets things. I mean, I was blown away. I was like, this is really cool. Like, okay, yeah, I've seen Wim Hof, sitting in a hot tub, in Finland or where the hell he is. And I like his breathing method, but I didn't really know about the science. And so I started doing that. Right. And it's uncomfortable. Right. I mean, I just did it the other day right. And John was doing snow angels while he was feeding the chickens and pigs.
Teresa Larson, I don't know, she may not have posted it yet, but she sent Will and I a little preview. She literally covered her entire body from head to toe in snow. I mean, like she's standing up all the way up to here. Yeah. In snow, putting herself into that extreme temperature because of what it does for your longevity. And I can also tell you, we can't see her right now, but we have our EA in the background. And I know for a fact she's shaking her head saying, no way in hell am I ever doing a cold shower.
It started off with just 30 seconds. I tried doing that. I'm like, I discovered that in my shower, like it doesn't get cold enough. It's got a governor, so it kind of pisses me off. So, but again, like what I started doing, and this is simple. I've got a neighborhood pool, with my floaties on, as John says, and I'm in there and I just did 1 minute in. It was probably like 48 degrees. 1 minute in up to my head, dump my head, get in. So I'm feeling the breeze, and then 1 minute back in the hot tub. And then I did that 6 times. Yeah. Right. And it's interesting. You notice that your tolerance for, doing difficult things starts to raise slowly, or like, as you inoculate yourself into that, you get immersed in it, you develop a tolerance, a stress tolerance. And that's what's interesting. The other thing I would say, Will, and this kind of gets into the how-to, I know we're going to get into it in a minute, is really being diligent about tracking your progress. Like, Will, I don't know about you, but like John's like really big data nerd, and he always likes he always likes to correct my spelling and grammar and my numbers and everything else. So,
Will gets it too. Poor guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he does it great. Really John, you do it gracefully though. So thank you. Yeah. John.
Oh, come on.
Not with Andy. I don't.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He definitely doesn't. He's like, your math's wrong, you idiot. And I feel really bad about myself for about a week. So no, yeah, I think tracking it's really important. And then what's great is like, that's when technology becomes a real advantage, right? Because there's so many it's like I started using this thing called Habit Share. Shout out to my colleague Brian Kane, who taught me about this. He uses it, and so like you can create habits and then track it. Is that what you have? Okay, we're throwing it up there.
We've got the Whoop, and I know you wear the Aura ring.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Yeah, all these things are really cool, but like it's not about the tools. It's about how do you interpret the information and what do you do with it, right? Is it kind of helping you? It creates these guardrails and these bumpers for you to just stay on track, right? Because like human beings, like we're notoriously unpredictable creatures, right? Because we're complex beings. We're not robots, right? And I think that even veterans, like when you get out of the military, it's not easy. The conditions aren't the rails are off now, right? It's why I gained, a bunch of weight and fell off the wagon until John entertained me enough to go do something crazy. without even asking his wife, mind you. But it's something I think it's easy to do, right? So you got to set the conditions for discipline to exist. You've really got to tap into your motivational systems, and then I think you got to keep track of it. I think the last piece I will say, the discipline is you got to do it with a team. We are not
accountability,
accountability partners, right? And like I would not have been able to do that if it wasn't for John. Like if I was competing with my ass off with John, because I wasn't gonna let him beat me, right? And John was doing the same thing, right?
Let's just kind of inform our listeners what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Last, I don't know, March, April timeframe in 2022, Andy calls me up and he's got a great idea that he's come up with a mutual friend of ours, Jason Van Camp, another special forces officer, and founder of the nonprofit Warrior Rising and the for-profit Mission 60, both of which Andy and I have had worked with. But Andy calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I want to do a half Ironman against you," and he and I have both kind of fallen off the wagon. I hadn't done a whole lot of training, put on some weight since the last half Ironman I've done, which was, I don't know, 20 years prior. So I've changed in weight and in age and in bone structure and everything else. And oh, by the way, now I've got 3 young kids. So it's a juggling thing. And I know Andy's got 4 kids and he's juggling his career and everything else. But it was coming back to having a goal that you work towards. It was there. And here's the kicker. So Andy and I were going to compete in Waco in the half Ironman in October of last year. We had 6 months basically to train for it, and we trained every day. We were competing with the mileage and everything else. And about 10-15 days prior to the race, Andy crashes. He crashes his bike on a 75-mile bike ride or something. And crashed his bike, but not only collapsed his lung, broke a rib. Not only that, to add some insult to injury, crashed into fucking poison ivy.
Who does that?
Right?
I do that.
Yeah. I know he was scared of the race.
You got some shit luck.
He went to
I was scared.
New levels.
Still suspect. It's still freaking suspect to whether any. Shout out to Jeremy Brown, who I think's listening. But Jeremy Brown, who runs Mind Right Endurance, they provided my training protocols, stuff like that too. He rode with me, and I hadn't been riding with anybody, so I was kind of like this golden retriever on a bike. I'm still willing to bet that John paid Jeremy to push me just at the last minute, make that happen. He planted the poison ivy. Yeah.
So,
that was a total.
So the reason I inject the story, yes, I did pay. I paid him, and I still owe him. I owe him a lot of money. The reason I bring that story up is so Andy and I are like competing, but we're also holding one another accountable, right? Yeah. Hey, like we're talking a lot of shit, but then I see his Strava. Like for those of you who are not familiar with Strava, is basically a workout tracker that it's like a workout social media thing where you can see what people have been doing exercise wise. I see his stuff and I give him some support. This is all behind the scenes. We talk a lot of trash in front of everyone, but we support one another behind the scenes. And then he crashes. And this is, again, 10 or 15 days before the fucking race. And now my wheels metaphorically fall off. Like, I'm like, fuck. Now I have no motivation. Yes, I have this massive race coming up, but I don't have anybody to hold me accountable. So literally, my best training was up until the point where Andy crashed. And then it went downhill from there because, yes, I still had a big, hairy, audacious goal, but I didn't have a workout partner to hold me accountable. Now, I say all that. I'm keeping an eye on the time here, Andy.
Yeah, we're good.
I know you've got about 5 more minutes or so that we can chat. This is definitely going to have to be a 2-part episode, 2-part series. Maybe have you back 2, 3, 4 times because this is all invaluable to us, me and Will, but also to our audience.
Sure.
So I know, again, we've got 5 minutes. Where do we want to go from here with the last 5 minutes?
Well, I was just going to say too, that's a really important part of accountability because John, I noticed, and you and I talked about it, is that, so I think it was also really cool to watch from the sidelines, holding a sign, mind you, that says, beat Navy and John, try not to suck, which was a big hit.
He did show up to support me.
Yeah, and so that's what we do, right? I mean, we're best frenemies. And so
That's right.
no, John's my brother, so I was like, no way in hell I'm going to let him not do this. And so, but what was cool is our buddy Nate Last, shout out to Nate, he showed up and did the whole thing with you. That was really cool to watch. The whole step of the way, right? Like
side,
well, John, tell me how that helped you get through, because I mean, it was not optimal conditions. Like, how did you and Nate work together? Like, I haven't heard that from you. How did that work together for you to one step at a time to accomplish your goal?
Yeah, that race, man, it was definitely less than ideal. It was pouring down rain for the swim. And granted, everybody's like, well, you're in the swim. It doesn't matter. You're wet anyway. Well, you feel it when you're in the water. It's pelting you on the back. And so it's a pretty long swim, 1.2 miles. And then you get out and you do the bike, and the entire bike, just about, it's raining, pouring down, wind blowing. And then, then almost as soon as we get off the bike, the sun comes out and just bakes us, because it's in Waco, Texas. It's hot.
Wow.
And I could tell you, even with so this was a head-to-head competition that we had kind of put together between me and Andy, Army versus Navy. But it was also, amongst the entire half Ironman. Yeah. But it was also a fundraiser. We had talked a lot of trash for like 6 months, raised $45,000 or so for this nonprofit, awesome. Warrior Rising. But man, about halfway through that run, I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to finish this. But I had Nate Last side by side with me, literally from when we got in the water, every step of the way from beginning to the end. And if I don't know if I would have finished it if he was not there, because it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. So that's again, shout out to Nate. Thanks for being there for me, brother. And then shout out to the importance of accountability and having someone to rely on, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think that, and likewise for me too, I was really disappointed, like we had working really hard, and I felt like I let a lot of people down, like including myself, and so, and you and I talked about this too. It was like, I mean, you did such a great job of telling me, like, dude, you busted your ass. Like John was encouraging me to go buy like Ironman gear. That's like part of the thing, right? I was like, no, I didn't earn it. Like, he's like, dude, no, yeah, you did. So my self-talk, that chatter you have between the ears that we default to negative. I mean, John was kind of stepping in, helping me get more neutral. And to be like, I look back now and it was like, okay, I'm not going to go out like a chump like this. Right. And so to me, I set another high and hard goal. And what was cool is that my baseline was a lot higher. So by the time I healed, it took me about 60 days. Okay. I took a step back. So again, it wasn't about achievement orientation. Did I achieve what I set out to do in terms of the SMART goal, the specific, measurable, action-based, realistic, time-bound goal? No, I didn't. But I grew in the process. So to me, the growth that I had personally, professionally, physically, mentally, like I kind of got my mojo back, right? And so, and I think John would say the same thing. And again, even though it wasn't about the achievement and the outcome, it was about the process. And I am in so much of a better situation now to do even better. And so I was able to set a higher and harder goal and be more specific. Now I'm saying, okay, I want to finish in under 7 hours, and I want to beat John's time. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to care, especially John. But like,
I'll know.
He'll know. He'll know because, and John and I bonded in a way that is, I don't want to get all touchy feely on you, but we meditate on the show. So go. Yeah. John and I came together in ways that we probably wouldn't have otherwise. Right. And so, I feel like I got a friend for life out of the deal too. So,
same here, man.
That's a pretty awesome. That's a pretty awesome thing that, I'll take. Oh, and Nate's doing it with me again, man. Nate the Great, and then another friend's doing it. So we're doing this in. So our goal now is to do a half Ironman on April 2nd. It's a Sunday. More to follow on that too. I have a new purpose. I'm running for Team Red, White, and Blue. I'm an ambassador for them now. Because one of the things I realized, and I also learned through this social connection, this community, this tribe, I was missing that in person. John was freaking awesome, but I really wish that I would have trained with a team. And I know I needed that. So that's why I joined Team Red, White, and Blue. So I'll be racing for them. My buddy Daniel Roby from Presidential Leadership Scholars, he runs Austin Street. It's a homeless shelter in the Dallas area. He's raising money for them. And then Nate's like our adult supervision to make sure that we get across the finish line. So I think that's a good example. Like John, hey, what does it take to do something hard? And I think what we've broken down today is like, hey, you got to have motivation and discipline. but you got to have a team around you. Right. And so, and then we'll get it. I think as we get into the next session, we'll really get into the nitty gritty. We're going to get into the how-to, the 4 phases, the 4 phases of goal pursuit that I use. John will recognize this. I waffle back and forth and like to get the audience's opinion. I either call it detect, decide, deliver, and assess, which is a targeting methodology. That's a way that in the military that we identify and go after targets for that behavioral change I was talking about. Another way I describe the 4 phases is either plan, prepare, execute, and assess. And then there's steps that are in between that we can go into in detail. And then I've got a bunch of resources that are related to that we'll get into next time.
So let's talking about resources. Before we get into the kind of wrapping up of this show, again, we're definitely going to have you back because you've got so many things to share with us. How can our audience get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. I just ride in John's vapors on LinkedIn once in a while, but I'm trying to. What's that, Will?
No, I just think, I do. Everybody does. He's a top voice. You know what I mean? Like everybody's
come on, man. It's a big deal. Man. It's the other belt he wears, so when he's feeding the chickens. LinkedIn's my best, my strongest kung fu on social media. And so definitely follow me there at, Andy Riise. And then obviously Design to Perform. That's my company. I'm on Instagram, trying to figure that out. And then, Twitter once in a while. I'm trying to expand into Facebook, and I got a YouTube channel just like you guys, trying to get into that space as well too. Website's coming up, but it's going to be www.designtoperform.org pretty soon here as well. You can check me out. I'm also affiliated with Limitless Minds, which is a mental fitness company. It's owned by Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Broncos. Yes, he did not have a good year, but I guarantee he'll be back next year.
Right down the road.
Yeah, man. Yeah, go Broncos. And I'm also affiliated with Team Red, White, and Blue as well. Into Growth is another company I work with, an executive search and leadership company. But all those affiliations are kind of on my LinkedIn and what I'm related to, and how you can find me is those ways.
Solid. Well, that's awesome, man. And we'll definitely put that all in the show notes. That said, I know you've got like 2 minutes before you got to bolt. So if you could lead us through maybe a 1 minute, wrap it up, closing practice, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. As long as you're not driving distracted, I want you to stand up wherever you are too. So go ahead and stand up, fellas. Stand up. This is a grounding technique that I like to use when I get on Zoom calls with groups. So what I want you to do is I want you to roll out your shoulders, roll out your neck. So I want you to do a quick body scan on the top of your head, scan it all the way down through your shoulders, through your legs, down to your toes. I want you to wiggle your fingers and your toes. And then again, just like you did in the beginning of the episode, when you're ready, I want you to relax your shoulders. And I want you to enter in a breath, like you're breathing through your belly, bringing the breath in through your nose, in through your belly, up into your diaphragm. Don't suck it in, John. Pause at the top. 4 or 5 seconds out. Breathe in again. And as you're doing that, I just want you to think about one thing that you learned today that you want to put into action to make yourself and your team better. I just want you to have that intention in your mind. As you breathe in, as you bring out, think about that one big thing that you want to put into action when this podcast is over. And when you're ready, gentlemen, floor is yours. Thank you so much for having me. Beat Navy.
Dang, you beat me to it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Andy. Awesome. I know you got we have 1 minute or less, but hey, thank you so much. We definitely have to come back because I think goal pursuits and discipline that we talked about. Someone made a comment on the, during the live broadcast about discipline, and those two things really work they need to be together, but also that accountability piece I think is just such an incredible key, huge. I mean, how we've grown this show, how we've become so successful, John and I, is because of, and Lindsay, like our accountability. Like we just keep growing because we rely on each other, but we also hold each other accountable to get stuff done. And that's just an awesome way to pursue goals. And we can talk next time about, what if we don't have that partner or haven't found that partner yet? Like, how do we go, alone, until we come to that place? So
Yeah, how do you make that roadmap and build that GPS, man? That's
there
what
you
it's
go.
about.
Exactly.
Solid,
Guidance
guys.
and having something to refer to, right? So awesome.
Hey, looking forward to having you on the next show. And for our audience, share this show with those who need it. And until next time, peace.
Peace, everybody. Thank you, Andy. Thanks, John. Thanks.
Joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check